Well, hello, confirmands. This is Lutheran Foundations. It is a confirmation curriculum. This is year one. Year one is called It Starts Here, Stories of the Old Testament, and this is already lesson 24, in which we talk about the prophet Elisha, the heir of Elijah. So Elijah has been taken to heaven in this fiery contrivance, this chariot and horses of fire. We know that he's going to come back sometime before the Messiah, but Elisha still has work to do. And remember, Elisha has asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. So in our story today, we're going to be looking for evidence of that request being given, that Elisha can do everything that Elijah was able to do, but in some cases more. And as I told you last lesson, we want to be paying attention to this because there's going to be stuff that Jesus says and does that anticipates you knowing these stories. So that when you hear Jesus or see Jesus do some stuff, you're going to say, oh, I remember when Elisha did something like that, only much smaller. And it's meant so that you have a sense of the greatness of Jesus, the grandeur of Jesus, the power of Jesus. You know, that this whole story fits together. So Elisha, again, spends most of his time in the northern kingdom, although he dips down into the southern kingdom as well. Most of Elisha's stories are in the book of 2 Kings in the front of your Bible, and so if you want to read them there, that's where you will find them. And again, we are not doing every Elisha story that's there. We just don't have time. I'm picking the ones that you need to know because they either look back at something that Elijah did, or they look forward to something that we'll see in Jesus. You understand? Good. All right. So the first story we want to talk about is that Elisha traveled around Israel, and he was beloved by the people. He helped where he could. And one day a woman came to him, a widow, and she said, you remember my husband, I hope. He was one of the young prophets. He's been killed, and I was left with 2 sons, and now we're in trouble. And Elisha asked the nature of their trouble, and they are deeply in debt. And their creditor, the guy that they owe money to, has come to her and said that if she can't pay her debt, he will take her 2 sons as slaves. That may seem crazy to you, right? If you get in trouble with credit card debt, nobody comes and takes your kids as slaves. But in this day, that was a way to discharge your debt. That was a way to pay things off. And so she is right up against it. If she can't pay this man, her sons are going to be taken from her and sold into slavery, which is also devastating for her, like we talked about in the Elijah story, that this widow doesn't have a pension, doesn't have Social Security, that her sons are her Social Security, that if she can get them to adulthood, then they will take care of her in her old age and she won't starve to death. So this is a devastating thing. It's a devastating thing for a mother. It's a devastating thing for her in terms of her own financial security. She's in trouble. She goes to Elisha. Elisha says, what do you have? She says, I have 1 little jug of oil. Elisha says, that'll be enough. Now, in your head, I want you to be thinking about the widow in Zarephath, right, who had the little jug of oil that was able to provide for Elijah, the widow, and her 1 son during the couple of years that Elijah lived with them in Zarephath, right? That's in your head. You know that story. We got another little jug of oil. Elisha says to the woman, go borrow every bowl, every jar, every container from your neighbors that they'll loan you, and then pour from your little jug of oil into all those borrowed containers. What? But she obeys. They borrow every vase and bowl and dish and jug that they can find. The whole floor of their little house is covered with them. And the boys hand her bowl after bowl after bowl, jug after jug after jug, and she keeps pouring from this little tiny flask of oil she has, and it never, ever runs out. And finally, they filled every container that they have from this little tiny jug that the oil has miraculously multiplied. Again, you're looking for this, Elijah could do this. Look what Elisha can do. And the woman goes back to Elisha and says, okay, I did that. It's kind of amazing. Now what? And Elisha says, sell all of it. Sell all that olive oil. Pay your debts and live on the rest. And that's what she does. Now, Elisha continues to travel around. He continues to talk to people and to care for people. There's a woman in a town called Shunem that she and her husband take care of Elisha and his servant whenever they're passing through town. They stay with them. They get fed there. It's a very comfortable spot. And the woman asks her husband after one of these visits, why can't we do something more for the prophet? Let's build a little room for him onto our house. Have a bed and a chair and a lamp. And whenever he comes, he'll have his own place where he can crash, his own private space. And the husband thinks this is a great idea. And so they go about putting this addition on their house, a little room for Elisha. And Elisha, when he comes the next time, he is very pleased. And he asks what he can do for them. And they say, we don't need anything. We're good. We're glad you're happy. And Elisha talks to his servant and he says, can you think of anything we can do for them? And the servant scratches his head and he says, well, they don't have any kids. And Elisha thinks about it, and they don't have any kids. And then, again, in this time of history, that's a disastrous thing, not to have kids. And so Elisha tells her that she will have a son. And the next time Elisha shows up, there is a little boy in her arms. And, they are so happy. They're happy beyond words. And a couple years pass with Elisha drifting in and out. And this woman being happy and the husband being happy and the little boy growing up and following his dad around, and it's just sweet. So one day this little boy is out with his dad in the fields and he clutches his head and he cries out, my head, my head, my head. And the dad has one of the servants take him back to his mom and he cuddles into his mom's lap and his breathing gets slower and slower and slower and he dies. The woman picks up her son and she puts him on Elisha's bed. Now, you know the story of Elijah when the widow of Zarephath's son died, so you can guess what's going to happen here, right? She puts the little boy on Elisha's bed and she sets out to go and get the prophet. Elisha sees her coming from quite a distance. And he sends his servant running out to see what the problem is, and the servant finds out that the child has died. Comes running back to Elisha, right, with the woman in tow. It says the child's died. Elisha says, "Run as fast as you can. Take my staff, my stick, place it across the child's body, over his face. That's what you should do. Do that right now." And the servant takes off running. The woman says, No. Servant is fine. You're coming too. And Elisha says, okie dokie. So the servant goes off running, does what Elisha says, finds the dead boy, puts the stick across his body on his face. Nothing changes. Comes running back, meets Elisha and the woman on the road, right? So they're, Elisha and the woman are coming. The servant's running back. Says nothing happened. Elisha keeps going, goes into the room, and he prays that God would bring this child back to life. Right? The kid sneezes a couple of times, eyes open, back to life. So brings it back to his mom. Anything Elijah can do, Elisha can do too. There's a couple of miracles about water and food that Elisha does. The water by Jericho was bad, and Elisha heals the spring. We haven't seen that since Moses, right? That the water is now pure and healthful for people and animals around Jericho. There's another time where Elisha's at a party and some dope has accidentally cut up poisonous gourds into the stew that's being served, and people are eating the stew and someone realizes that there's poison in the food, and Elisha heals the stew, makes it non-poisonous so that nobody gets sick, nobody dies. There's another story where Elisha is hanging out with a bunch of the young prophets, and someone brings 20 little barley loaves. I think muffins, just tiny little loaves. And Elisha says, pass them out among the men. And his servant looks at him like he's nuts and says, there's 100 guys here and we got 20 muffins, right? What are you talking about? And Elisha just says, pass them out. And they do, and the men eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and those muffins just keep expanding, multiplying. I mean, I don't even know the right word, but the muffins are never consumed until these 100 men are absolutely, Thanksgiving Day stuffed from these 20 little barley muffins. Now, just you might remember the story that later on, Jesus is going to feed a group of people with little barley loaves. Jesus doesn't start with 20 barley loaves. He starts with 5. Right? The little boy has 5 barley loaves and a couple of fish. And he doesn't feed 100 men, he feeds 5,000 men. So this thing that Elisha could do, feeding 100 guys till they're satiated with these 20 buns, Jesus feeds 5,000 with 5. So you're supposed to see Elijah, wow, Elisha, amazing, Jesus, off the charts. But you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't see that unless you knew these stories, which is why I plead with you week after week after week. A couple stories left on Elisha, and then I'll let you go. So during this time in history, with these wicked kings and their episodic control over their countries, other countries, neighboring countries, would raid into Israel. And one of the countries that sometimes raided into Israel was Syria to the north. And the Syrians would come in and they'd steal livestock and they'd steal possessions, and sometimes they'd take people back as slaves. And so there was a little girl, a little Israelite girl, seized in one of these raids. She was brought back to Syria. She was sold in a slave market to a guy named Naaman. Naaman was a commander in the army of Syria, and he was a favorite of the Syrian king. The Syrian king used to like to go to their pagan church with Naaman, and Naaman would take care of him there. So Naaman sees this little girl and buys her as a maid for his wife, a gift for his wife. And she comes home and she lives with Naaman and his wife, and she's treated very well, and she starts to think of them as her family, which happens sometimes. And she, brushes her lady's hair and helps her get dressed and all those things. Now, it comes to pass that Naaman gets sick. He gets leprosy, which is a terrible, terrible disease in that time. There's no cure for it. Your skin would turn white. You'd lose feeling in your hands and your feet. You'd sometimes lose fingers and toes. It was just a devastating disease, and there's no way back from it. And everybody's sad because Naaman's a good guy. Everyone's sad that he's going to die, and he's going to die so awfully, and he's going to die alone. And the little girl says to her mistress, if only this had happened in Israel where there's a prophet who could fix the master. And the lady says, what now? And the little girl, she was just little when she was seized, but she knew about a guy named Elisha, and she knew that there was a God that could do big stuff. And so the lady tells Naaman. Naaman goes and tells the king. The king is very happy. This is the king of Syria. He's very happy, and he writes a letter to the king of Israel saying, this guy who's just handed you the letter is my servant Naaman. Cure him of his leprosy. I will be very grateful indeed. Thank you. Best regards. I don't know how kings sign letters and do all that stuff. And puts the letter in Naaman's hand, gives him, a bunch of laundry baskets of gold and laundry baskets of silver and 10 beautiful outfits of clothes, silks and beautiful clothes, sends him down the road to Israel. So Naaman and his servants, carrying all this stuff, show up at the palace of Israel. They send the letter in. The king of Israel reads this letter, right? This is my servant Naaman, cure him of his leprosy. And the king of Israel panics. Right? He tears his clothes. He puts ashes on his head. He says, you see what's going on here? The king of Syria is looking for an excuse to go to war with me. I can't cure anybody of leprosy. Nobody can cure anybody of leprosy. This is just, I'm going to fail here, and then there's going to be all-out war between our countries, and I'll probably lose everything. Right? While he's still talking, a note comes from Elisha. Right? And the king, there's a note from Elisha. What does he want? Well, you should probably read it. So the king reads the note, and Elisha just says, what are you doing with ashes on your head and torn clothes? Send the guy to me. Which is kind of spooky, right? But the king is relieved, and he sends Naaman down the road to Elisha's place. So Naaman and his big party and all the gifts and all the gold and all the silver and all the clothes, they show up at Elisha's house, and Elisha doesn't even come out. He sends his servant out, and the servant says, yeah, my master's kind of busy. He says, just go dip yourself in the Jordan River 7 times and you'll be cured of your leprosy. Thanks very much for stopping by. See ya. Naaman is mad. He feels disrespected. He feels invisible. He starts to pout and to stomp home. I'm not going to dip myself in any stupid river. Right? This is a muddy river anyway. There's nice clean rivers back home. I'm not going to do it. And they're all stomping back home. And one of Naaman's servants says to him, Master, what? If the man of God had asked you to do something difficult, would you have done it? And Naaman says, well, yeah. And the servant says, he told you to just dip yourself in a river 7 times. Let's take the 3 minutes and do that. And Naaman realizes wisdom when he hears it, right? This is something you and I can keep working on. When you get mad, you stop listening. Naaman, even though he was mad, listened, and he listened to one of his servants, not just someone more important than him. So Naaman goes and he dips himself in the Jordan River. First time, nothing. Second time, nothing. Third time, nothing. Remember, we're looking at numbers here too, right? 7th time, Naaman comes up out of the water. His skin is completely restored. It's like the skin of a young child. It is just perfect and pink, and there's not a spot or a blemish anywhere on him. He's healed. And immediately they head back to Elisha's house. This time, Elisha actually comes out to talk to him. And Naaman tries to pay him. And Elisha is not at all interested in payment. He doesn't want anyone to think that God's miracles and God's grace are for sale, and he won't take any of the gold and any of the silver and any of the clothes. He just says no. And Naaman is amazed by this too. It's been a big day for Naaman. And then Naaman says, well, will you at least grant me 2 favors? And Elisha says, what do you got? And Naaman says, first, can I take a wagon load of dirt from your front yard back home so I can build an altar to the true God there? Because I'm pretty clear who the true God is, and I don't know if he likes Syrian soil or not, but I'm pretty sure that right around here it was, pretty good. And so I'd like to do that. Elisha isn't going to have a big fight with him about any of that, and Elisha just says, fine, you can take a wagon load of dirt out of my yard. And then Naaman says, now listen, here's the other thing, and this might be a problem. The king of Syria is an old guy. He loves me. He's a little unsteady. He likes when I take him to church, to his God. And when he bows down, because I'm holding on to his arm, I'm gonna be bowing too. And I just want to make sure that that's cool, because I know who the real God is. But I also have responsibilities to my king and my friend, who's old. And Elisha says, don't worry about that. God knows what's in your heart. You take care of your friend. You take care of your king. You take your truckload or your wagon load of dirt. Everything's good between you and me. Now, skedaddle. And this time, Naaman is very happy to skedaddle. And they go up the road. Now, Elisha's servant sees all this money and all these clothes going up the road, and he is unhappy. He thinks his master has made a terrible mistake. We could have been rich. And he waits a little bit, and then he goes running up the road after Naaman. And Naaman sees him coming and stops and waits for him. And the servant says, after you left, a couple of young prophets showed up at my master's house, and we don't have any clothes for them. They're looking pretty threadbare. So my master Elisha sent me for a couple of those outfits of clothes. And Naaman says, absolutely. And he sends a couple of outfits of clothes and a couple of the laundry baskets of silver back with Elisha's servant. Sends a couple of his servants to help carry the stuff. They get near Elisha's house, and Elisha's servant tells Naaman's servants, that's close enough, thank you, I'll get it from here. Because he obviously doesn't want Elisha to see that he has this stuff. Right? He's done this on his own. He's freelancing here. He's trying to keep this stuff on his own. And so he hides the clothes and he hides the silver, sends Naaman's servants back to him. Naaman and the rest of the Syrians head back to Syria, and Elisha's servant comes into the house. Elisha says to him, where you been? And the servant says, nowhere. And Elisha says, you know, my heart went with you when you went up the road and talked to Naaman and got the silver and got the clothes and brought them back. And because you care about riches more than you care about God, you get the leprosy. And the servant looks down and he is covered with leprosy. He is white as can be. The Bible doesn't say there was screaming, but I'm pretty sure, I'll bet my car that there was some screaming, and he winds up dying of his leprosy. All right, so these are the stories of Elisha that you have to know in order to know what's going on when Jesus does what he does and says what he says. You and I are going to get back together next week, and we're going to keep talking about these characters of the Old Testament that you need to know. We are almost done. What are we, 4/5 done with confirmation this year? We are getting very, very close, and I am grateful for all of the attention that you're paying, all of the thinking you're doing, and I look forward to talking with you about any and all of these things. You take care of yourself. Bye-bye.